So, Daishal, thanks for talking to me today. It's nice to finally catch up, and I see we actually don't live that far away from each other, just a few miles in kind of geographically, but probably many, many miles in terms of what we do. Tell us a little bit about your kind of career in sound and what you do and how you got there. Because I know we had some loose connections. I almost worked with you in terms of radio, and of course, I love the kind of a lot of the music that you were involved with as well. So maybe give us a potted history of that.
All right. Well, potted history. How long have we got? Because it goes back a fair while, actually.
Well, do you want to give me sort of 5-10 minutes on that? On because you said we were just talking, weren't we? And you said about you grew up in Merthyr, and then
Yes.
you left there at 17. So maybe just from there into music, maybe.
All right. Yeah. Well, from about the age of 11 onwards, really, my main aim was to become a pop star. You had people, obviously you had the Beatles and things like that. They were coming into fruition then, and they were just fantastic. And music just took over my life. I'm afraid that when I was in school, it was quite good, 11 plus and all that. So I sailed through that, went to grammar school, and then I discovered a guitar. And nothing mattered anymore other than playing my guitar. And I was determined to try and make something of myself, because at the time there was a group called the Bystanders. The Bystanders later turned into Man, and basically they were a Merthyr group, and they were on the radio, on the wireless in those days. And I thought, well, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
But of course, I didn't really have the opportunity. But I tried as hard as I could to learn to play guitar as best as I could. And I played with a little local band, and then one day there was a knock on the door. Now, I wasn't there at this stage, but my mum was. She opened the door, and there was a gentleman there in a suit, tie, with a green MGB, looking every part a businessman. And he said to my mum, he said, "I understand your son plays guitar." "Yes," she said. "Yes, he does. Yeah. He said, "Well, I'm a drummer in a band from Cardiff." "Cardiff," she said, "that's a long way away." So he said, "We're looking for a guitarist. Do you think your son would be interested?" "Oh, no, love," she said. "No, he doesn't drive. It's too far to Cardiff anyway." But anyway, undaunted, he actually paid a second visit, and I was in this time. And he offered me a job with his group. They were playing the pop songs of the day, but they were doing it in a residency. And it was a pub in Roos, I believe, and for about 3 or 4 nights a week. And anyway, long story short, I took the job, even though I'd only just started working.
How old were you then, Di?
What was that, sorry?
How old were you then?
Well, I was 16 at that stage.
Wow, okay.
I didn't take my my A-levels. I left school with my O-levels, and that was it, really. I went straight into work. But starting work at 7:30 in the morning, whoa, that was a bit of a shock for me. So the opportunity of going to play my guitar, I jumped at it. And in fact, I was earning 5 times as much playing my guitar than I was actually from my day job.
Yeah.
So when things got serious and they moved on to another residency in Cardiff this time, even my mum and my dad said, "Well, look, you're earning good money. Give up your day job." And that's what every musician wants to hear, at that age anyway. Give up your day and become professional.
Yes.
But I still couldn't drive. And my poor dad had the job of 6 or even 7 nights a week, taking me to Cardiff every night, finishing at 2:00 in the morning, coming back to Merthyr for 3. And he would have to get up at 6:30 in the morning. So he was shattered.
Yeah.
So I gave up my day job and I moved to Cardiff. And of course, that was it. The residency taught me a lot, actually, because the club I was playing was a diners club, in as much as that they had food. It was a restaurant. They had some fantastic cabaret acts there, big names. People like the Searchers, the Tremolos, people that nowadays people who wouldn't have heard them, but believe me, at the time they were big stars. And we were playing in the discotheque all the songs of the day. And in the afternoons, we used to go and watch these groups, people like as I say, the Searchers, Tremolos, the Seekers. And they were treating it really professionally, in as much as that they would rehearse during the daytime between, say, 2 and 6. They would have some food and they'd come back to do their show in the evening. And we thought, well, if we're going to be stars, we should treat it as a professional, or profession rather. So we started rehearsing 3 or 4 hours and then playing another 3 or 4 hours. So literally that guitar was hardly out of my hands for about 8 to 10 hours a day, 7 nights a week.
Wow.
And it was a fantastic grounding. And because of that, I suppose I must have got a little better. And one of the acts, believe it or not, was the New Seekers. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. Some people might have heard of that, but they were a reasonably famous group at the time. And the bass player offered us a recording contract because he had his own production company at the time in London. So off to London we went. We managed to record in George Martin's studio, a place called Air Studios, which was the most fantastic, clinically, technically correct studio in the world. It was wonderful. And I fell in love with not just music or guitar, but the sound of music. Because some of the artists that they had there of the day, you know, well, they were just too big to mention, really. But we could hear all this going on around us, and I just fell in love with the sound of it as well. Yeah. So I thought, when I grow up, when I finish with the group, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to open a recording studio.
Okay.
Which eventually, after a number of years touring with the group, I was able to do that and opened a studio. But being in Cardiff, we might as well have been like 100 years away from London.
Yes.
Because you need to attract the bigger names to be able to pay for the studio, really. And we'd invested quite a hefty sum. So much so, really, that it was difficult to make it pay. So from music, we thought, how can we make the studio pay? We thought, what's this television malarkey all about then? Sound for television. So we turned a corner, invested in even more equipment, more sophisticated equipment, and we went digital, one of the very first studios in the country to become digital.
What was the name of your studios, Di?
Well, at the time, it was called Music Factory.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And then we changed the name to Taran, which in Welsh means thunder. And that's when we started to specialize in digital audio for television.
Di, just to say, talking about thunder, the angle you're sitting at, unfortunately, the sun is shining through your head. There we are. Okay.
Now then, if I go that way, the light is shining through my head.
It's okay. The light. Well, there we go. That's good.
That's
sorry.
better.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. So Music Factory. Who else was involved in Music Factory at that time?
Well, there was an accountant. Good fella to have on your side, really, when you're starting up a business. There was a roadie from AC/DC.
Right.
And myself, and also my ex-boss from the radio station, which I haven't actually told you anything about, but
hopefully you will.
After my career in music with the group Sassafras, I actually went to work for a radio station, unintentionally. I'd heard that there was a new radio station opening in Cardiff, and I offered my services.
Yeah.
I was actually interviewed over 4 pints of Brains SA.
Yes.
And by the time I'd got through my 4th pint, I'd got the job.
Who interviewed you? Do you remember?
Yes. My boss was Martin Newton. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but a lovely guy. And he'd actually been involved with 10cc. He'd sort of given up the music side of things and then gone into broadcast. He was a great technician. He would build you anything from a transmitter site to a television station.
A useful guy.
So, he became responsible then as chief engineer for the radio station. Okay. Offered a job as an engineer. Now, to me, the word engineer meant a balance engineer, studio engineer. And I didn't find out until the next day, to him, engineer meant to go and fix that amplifier.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I didn't really have much knowledge of fixing amplifiers or transmitters or whatever. So we had a good laugh about it. and I said my goodbyes. But before I did go, he showed me around the station, and they were, at the time, there were wiremen there, building, wiring microphone leads and mixers. And I said, well, I could do all that.
Okay.
I've just spent 10 years on the road with Sassafras. I can fix PAs with matchsticks. And so he said, well, we're not on air for 3 weeks. Hang about, bring your solder and iron, and then we'll take it from there. But at the end of the 3 weeks, they did offer me a job. And that job involved making commercials.
Okay.
So I used to get my group there in the evenings, and we'd come up with jingles, which was fantastic, because all of a sudden there was the music become part of my life again then. But this time I was actually engineering rather than playing guitar. I was just recording the group.
This is in West Canal Wharf, yes?
Yes, it was CBC, which was community broadcasting, wasn't it?
Yeah. Which part of the building were you recording the jingles in then?
Well, they had a recording studio there, albeit it was only an 8-track studio, but you could still do a lot of damage with 8 tracks. They had 2 on-air studios, a little news booth, and then there was my studio, which was, was big enough to take a group. And I think the very first advert that we recorded in there was a song for a company called Hypervalue. Now,
I remember that one. You did that one, did you?
Hypervalue.
Hypervalue. Oh, fantastic.
Yes, look no further.
were you involved with that or the other? Did you know I worked at Red Dragon for like 6 years, so I know that building well. Yeah. So did you? One of my favorite was "Don't Be Silly, Shop in Caerphilly." Do you remember that one?
I don't think we were responsible for that one.
A classic.
We did do one that went. It's time you went to Blaenau Gwent.
Lovely.
The rhythm and rhyme in that is superb, isn't it? Took a lot of thought, that one.
Yeah.
But we got contracts to do jingle packages for Capital Radio in London, Capital Radio in Abu Dhabi, and just about every single commercial radio station in the UK we would be making commercials for.
Wow.
Buy your cars from so-and-so, or whatever. But we were working with the same people. But at this stage, we were all doing it from Music Factory. We'd actually left CBC at that stage because it was taken over, I believe, by Red Dragon.
Yeah.
So we become independent, and for 2 years we just specialised in the recording of commercials.
Okay.
But working with the same people, I don't know. I just got a little bit frustrated, really, and we turned it into a commercial enterprise then.
Yeah.
Recording, elsewhere. But it's at that stage we soon realised that we couldn't bring the people out of London. It was very difficult in those days, and we were one of the very few studios in Wales, in actual fact. There was Sign in North Wales, and of course they had their own clientele, Welsh-speaking community. But down in Cardiff, there wasn't a lot of opportunity, to record in a professional way. That most of the bands, they couldn't afford to record with us because we had superb equipment that needed paying for. Yeah. So the hourly rate was a little bit above their grasp,
Did you work with any bands? Did you record any bands though that you remember particularly enjoying working with at that time?
With local bands, let's have a look. Who did we did local bands? We did work with a band called Cougar.
Oh yeah.
They were from Pontypridd area, and I can remember we'd start work at about 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, and we'd work through the night because they were actually working. They had day jobs. Now then, I could go home 7 o'clock next morning, you see, and I could sleep all day. But unfortunately, because they were working, they'd have to go straight to work.
Yeah.
And this went on for week after week after. They were absolutely cream crackered. They were shattered. But it was an enjoyable experience all around, actually. And they've done quite well for themselves. Or they did quite well for themselves. The album was released. And in fact, they're still friends of mine now, amazingly.
Was that K-O-O-G-A? Is that how it's spelled it?
Yes, yeah. The singer from Cougar, he went on to to join quite a big band by the name of Skin, and I think they
Oh, it's
toured
Neville, was it?
That's
Neville
Neville.
McDonald.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, he's got an absolutely phenomenal voice, hasn't he?
Oh, he's great. Yeah, and they're all such lovely people as well. You know, really, really good. No airs and graces with any of them, and
Yeah.
you know, a lot of the bands at the time I can remember, because I'd had a little bit of experience, obviously recording. What were their studios, and you know, a few names and all that we don't want to mention, but you know, I sort of knew the ropes a little bit. And they were difficult to tame. If you said to the drummer, perhaps, you know, you want to do it with a click track. Oh, I don't play with click tracks, you know, but it's nowadays it's a common practice, of course. And
Yeah. Well, everyone's got
vocals.
in-ear headphones up these days, aren't they? You know, so
Oh,
yeah.
yes, very much so. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing,
Hmm.
sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, isn't it? You know, but
Yeah.
it's nice to know that you're able to do it.
So, going back to Sassafras a little bit, because we've kind of skipped over Sassafras. Now, Sassafras, obviously, at that time, they were, like I say, you mentioned Man, there were a number of kind of rock bands coming through, I suppose, in Wales. But Sassafras had quite an interesting career, didn't they? Including your quite major tour of the States, massive stadiums, and, you know, you did some quite amazing things, really.
Yes, I mean, we started off, obviously, as a club band. We were, as I say, given a contract. Then we started doing universities. We were managed, which was quite a novelty, because you know, a lot of the local bands didn't have a manager, but at least we had a manager that could push us, able to get us better gigs through bigger agents. We toured for about 2 or 3 years doing universities, built up a following, and in fact, I believe, well, according to Wikipedia anyway, we hold the record for the most amount of gigs
In a year.
in a year. 332 gigs over
Yeah.
365 days.
How on earth do you do that? I mean, how's any human being, you know, manage that? I don't know.
Well, of course, I mean, there were bands. I mean, take for instance Status Quo. They did 3 gigs in 24 hours. We equaled that. They did it by aeroplane and helicopter. We did it with a transit van, you know. Penzance, I can remember the day now. Penzance. Then we did Warrington Football Club in the afternoon. Then we did Nottingham Boat Club, all within 24 hours. We didn't sleep. 3 2-hour-long sets, and a lot of traveling. You know, it's hard work, really, but I see that there's a local band at the moment doing quite a few gigs. What's his name? Guitarist.
Oh, I know who you mean straight away. Kind of guy with glasses, blues
Yeah,
player.
yeah. I think they did about 250 gigs, and they are reaping rewards for it now.
Yes.
I believe he's been nominated as a up-and-coming blues guitarist.
Yeah. Getting that radio airplay.
Yeah, fantastic. Well done. A CD, which is, you know, getting acclaim. Good on you. And I think that's the way to do it, really. You just, whatever you do in life, really, is as long as you work at it, I'm sure you're bound to get some sort of reward, really.
Where I wish I could remember his name. Where did the name Sassafras come from? It's an unusual word, isn't it?
Well, the group was in existence before I joined for a few months. They were a 3-piece group initially, and the guitarist from that 3-piece group, his wife went over to America for a holiday, I believe, and she bought a single out there called Hot Smoke and Sassafras, which was like #1 in the charts out there, by a group called Bubble Puppy. So when the guitarist, his name is Ralph, heard this, he said, great, he said, I know what we're going to call the group. Hot Smoke.
Yeah.
So they were called Hot Smoke, you see.
Yes.
But then when I joined, we became Sassafras, Hot Smoke and Sassafras. So I suppose I was the and, really. And then we became a 4-piece. We realized that we probably needed a front man, really, because we weren't that energetic on stage. So a friend of mine suggested we went to a nightclub, actually, to go and see a group. They were performing in Newport. So we went along, and yeah, wow, this lead singer was so dynamic. He was a real frontman. He was a showman, and we wanted him. So we offered him a position, and lo and behold, he said yes, he would join. Now, this is Terry, and at the time, he was playing with a band called Exit from Nottingham. He moved down to a flat in Cardiff, brought his PA with him as well, which was a big bonus, because we didn't have a PA.
Yeah.
And we became a 5-piece. Now, during all this process, I'd actually built a small demo studio in Canton in Cardiff called Dragon Studios. And we were able to make some demos. And it was from those demos, really, that we were able to gain a Pucker recording contract with Polydor.
Yeah. So we're talking about Terry Bennett here, aren't we? So Terry, just in all manners of the expression, is a larger-than-life character, as far as I can see.
Oh,
he's a big physical guy and a big personality, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, he wasn't always as large as he is now then, put it like that. Quite an energetic character. I can remember doing one gig with him with Sassafras, Loughborough University. And he had a habit of climbing to the top of the PA, and the PA was quite high. And he decided that he was going to jump off the PA, even though the PA was on the stage.
Yeah.
And he had these beams, big metal girders, running along the width of the Students' Union building where we were playing. And he jumped and was hanging by these girders. He turned around and then realized, well, of course, he's got to get back. So there he is, dangling above the crowd, and he's got to jump back. So he's swinging and swinging back and forth to try and get momentum. And he jumped, and he did land on the PA and started falling backwards. Well, his arms were flapping like an eagle with a sore head, And he did manage, thankfully, to salvage the situation. And he got down off the PA, jumped off the PA, back onto the stage, and off we went again. Well, in actual fact, we never stopped. We just kept.
I suppose the crowd thought it was part of the act, yeah?
Yeah. But I thought, Terry, one day you're going to damage yourself.
Yeah.
So that's Terry, fantastic showman. He really is. Was world class. And he proved himself even in the larger stadiums when eventually Sassafras made it to America. We were playing out there in
massive
big
stadiums.
Yeah, the biggest one we did was well over 100,000 people.
Wow.
Which was great.
Was that the Enorma Dome? Was it called the Enorma Dome? Is that the one?
It's the Boston Gardens, I think it's called. That was the biggest. 100,000 people, yeah.
Who else was on the bill? Do you remember that?
Yeah, we were part of the tour with Peter Frampton and Fleetwood Mac. Which was wonderful. I mean, they weren't as big as what they become because Peter Frampton at the time had a recording studio, a mobile studio, following him around to all the gigs. And one of the gigs that we did was Long Island Convention Centre, where he recorded a track called "Show Me the Way."
Oh yeah.
I'm actually on that recording.
Are you?
In fact. Yes, on that album. Yeah, clapping. But at least we were on the bill. We were like the warm-up act then. But Peter Frampton, Fleetwood Mac, Leonard Skinner, so they were real names, and obviously the people come to see them. But we were on the back of that, and Terry was able to hold his own there.
Yeah,
people loved him.
Well, I mean, I was watching some footage earlier today of your gig at St. David's Hall.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously, I mean, that's not that many years ago. What we're talking about now is quite a while back, but this wasn't that long ago, I don't think. And at the end of it, even then, Terry's got that showman kind of style to him, and he culminates the gig by booting his tambourine into the audience,
Yes, as somebody threw a pair of knickers on the stage, I think, like they would do for Tom Jones. We're of that age now. We weren't quite sure what to do with them, but... that was a good night, actually.
Yeah, it looked great.
Yeah.
And you ended up with the brass section and doing I Am the Walrus.
That's right. I mean, we hadn't played together for many years, but we decided that we were going to try to do it as correctly as we could. So we did rehearse quite hard for that. And we augmented some of the numbers with the brass section. And in fact, some backing vocals as well.
It was quite a big production, actually.
Yeah, well, we thought, I mean, St David's Hall, it's not your local sort of pub gig.
Hmm.
So we thought we'd try and turn it into some form of spectacle or whatever.
And it seemed to be
But
relatively full too.
yeah, it should have been fuller. Actually, there were more tickets sold
Hmm.
than people's seats on the seats, really, because it was at the height of the petrol shortage, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know, people couldn't get there or whatever, but they actually did sell more tickets than bums on seats. But we do hold a record for that place. Apparently, up until then, they hadn't sold as much beer as they did on the night when we played there.
You took the
So
right audience.
Yeah.
We liked a pint or two. Talking about your guitar playing. By the way, what was your main guitar? What was your first guitar where you bought a serious guitar? What was the first one you bought?
Oh, it was a pre-CBS Telecaster, and I also had a Hagstrom Viking, which was a semi-acoustic.
Oh, I love them.
Yes, lovely guitar, but unfortunately, both of them got stolen out of the van when we played a gig in Peterborough. Some people very kindly offered we stayed with them overnight, which we did. Went out next morning after breakfast, and the back doors of the van were open, and a lot of the equipment, including my guitars, had been stolen. But I've always been a fan of Telecasters, and in fact, I'm looking at one now, in fact. I've got 5 Telecasters, but I went on from Telecaster to Les Paul. The best Les Paul I ever had was a Yamaha version. It was an early Japanese copy of a Les Paul, and I loved that guitar, but it didn't quite have the sound out of the pickups. They were a little bit, I don't know, they weren't quality pickups, but the guitar itself was awesome, fantastic.
Big difference between a Telecaster and the Les Paul, isn't there, for in terms of kind of playability and sound and weight, I suppose?
Totally different guitars. One is very thick and one is very thin sounding, but I managed to tweak the amplifier so I could get some sort of equilibrium between the two of them, and always carried a Gibson and a Telecaster as well. I could seem to be able to make the transition between the two of them.
And if I remember with Sassafras, you did some sort of dual lead guitar stuff, didn't you?
Yes, we used to love harmony, you see, being brought up on people like the Beatles, and we'd love harmony. So it wasn't just the vocals, although there were 3 or even sometimes there were 4 people singing at one time. We tried the dual guitar thing in harmony as well. That seemed to work quite well. So, every song we had really had some form of twin lead in it.
I'm just interested in your guitar playing now, because I love talking about guitars. Which guitarists did you look up to, or have you looked up to over the years? Who would be your kind of guitar role models?
Well, first and foremost, it was George Harrison, because George seemed to have melody, even though he might sometimes be picking up the melody line of the song.
Yeah,
I was instantly attracted to that because it was simple. It was relatively simple, and I could actually learn to play. Hank Marvin, the same.
Yep.
Melody. Then we discovered, of course, the Blues Breakers with John Mayall, and that was a different style of guitar, and that was improvisation. So I copied a few notes from him, and learned whatever the relevant chords were, and then just played them in a different order. Developed my own style, and then realized, of course, he was playing in a blues scale, whereas people like George Harrison and even to a point Hank Marvin, they were alternating between the major scale and the minor scale. So I learned to play solos not just in the minor blues scale, but in the major scale. And the major scale is a very dominant scale within country music. And believe it or not, I love country music.
Telecaster would work well for that as well, probably.
Please. So there's always been an influence of country in my playing, really.
Yeah.
One of my favorite groups initially was a group called Area Code 615. Now, they were a bunch of American session musicians.
I've never heard them at all, actually, but I've
You have. You have. You don't realize.
Okay.
If I was to go do 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 the Old Grey Whistle Test theme.
Oh, they did that, did they?
That's Area Code 615.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But once again, melody came to the forefront on that.
Funny enough, I was talking to Tony Chapman. Tony Chapman, he's met you many years ago, by the way, and I think he probably remember meeting you maybe more than you met him. It's going back a long time ago, but he speaks highly of meeting with you anyway. But we were talking earlier about guitar solos, and we were saying about exactly what you just said actually there, Di, about how the best guitar solos, they kind of have a real lovely musicality to them. You can almost like sing those guitar solos, and they really work as a hook and a part. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yes, most definitely. Yeah,
Mm.
that's where I'm coming from. Everything I do comes from the heart, and I try and include melody within it. I'm not a fast guitarist. I don't see it's necessary to be, that flash and flamboyant. Really,
Hmm.
that's for the people who can really play guitar. I play guitar with my, how can I say, with my, as well as my fingers. I try to use a little bit of brain power to bring out the melody within a song. Then,
Yeah. I mean, see, what you were playing, could you know? I mean, you were known as you were nominated as one of the finest guitarists as Wales has ever produced, as you probably saw on that list on the BBC website a while back. Without embarrassing you, you're known as being a more than handy guitarist. Quite technical, I think. I think you're playing. To me, struck me as quite sort of technical, almost towards the kind of Steely Dan side of town, I suppose, maybe.
Well, it's relatively simple, really, as long as you know the difference between the major and the minor scale.
Okay.
You just follow the chord patterns, and you can play the same thing, but in different positions, and it sounds different.
Well, you can say that, but I know I'd never be capable of doing it.
Uh,
But following on from music, of course, I'm still trying to get my head around the timeline. It doesn't really matter, really. We've done such a range of things. CBC, I was really interested in that because of the radio stuff. Music Factory, working in music studios. Sassafras, tour in America, setting all kinds of records and everything else. But you said early on that you found, it was interesting actually. You said in the early days you already identified your love of sound, and that's kind of where you saw your passion, I suppose.
yes, very much.
And so could you tell me how you developed that? How because you now have your own studio, but what was the kind of journey towards that, and how's your sort of sound career shaped up?
At about the age of 10 or 11, before I started to play guitar,
Mm.
I think cassette players had just come out, and certainly quarter inch was, really the only real way of recording sound. And a friend of mine, Terry from Merthyr, he had a cassette player and he had a quarter inch machine as well. And he used to record songs off the radio. I thought, this is a brilliant medium. So I said to my mum, "Mum, can I have a tape recorder?" No, she said, "You can't have a tape recorder. They're too expensive."
Mm-hmm.
So that was the end of that. So from going from not being able to afford to have a cassette player to spending close on £500,000 on digital equipment, the story lies somewhere between the two of them.
Yes, that's quite a journey, isn't it?
It is quite a journey, but I mean, it was helped along by the fact, I think, that Sassafras were a recording band. Initially, I'd gone to Rockfield Studios. Now, Rockfield, when I first went there, was a barn upstairs. And it wasn't the studios that we all know, where Queen have recorded now. It was literally, to get your equipment up, you put it on a hoist and you hauled it up to a barn door upstairs, and they had a little quarter inch tape machine there, which later became an 8-track machine, I think. So I knew Rockfield quite well, and that's where I fell in love with recording, really. I just thought, this is just fantastic, being able to record yourself or other people.
Yeah.
So that's where it all stems from.
What's the name of the brothers, Di, who ran Rockfield?
Well, it's Charles and Kingsley Ward.
Kingsley, of course, yeah. And there's a documentary coming out very soon.
Yes.
Rockfield, yeah.
When is it out? Is it
next
out this
weekend? I think it is. Almost, yeah. So I mean, I've got to watch that. I'm sure you'll be watching that with interest as well.
Yeah.
Anything to say about Rockfield? Memories of Rockfield? I've already learned about the barn. I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah, well, as we were recording demos initially up there. Then the studio itself started to grow, and we used to use it then for the recording. We would mix at Air Studios in London, but the recordings were done in Rockfield when it then became a real Packer studio. And one of the producers actually of one of the albums that we did was a guy called Pete Gage. Now Pete Gage had been with a band called Vinegar Joe, and they had two quite famous singers. One of them was what's his name? Gosh, so famous I forget his name. But the girl singer was Elkie Brooks.
I'm desperately trying to remember that guy's name. I know who you mean exactly.
Massive, absolutely.
Did the Beatles? Not Joe Cocker.
No.
Singer of Vinegar Joe. Can't I keep myself?
Oh, you can see. I can see the video now. 3 girls, all in smart black dresses with a guitar, all in unison. Red lipstick. Why can't I remember his name?
They'll come back to you afterwards, I expect.
Nothing to do with my age, obviously not.
I can't remember.
But anyway, had a famous singer, and she used to cook for us. She used to cook, and she used to play piano and sing, and we used to sit outside the studio listening to her. She was a fantastic voice. Elkie Brooks, wonderful,
Yeah.
But then, we'd record there, and then we would mix in Air Studios in London, and they had some of the most fantastic names of the day there. Everybody from Paul McCartney to Roxy Music to Stevie Wonder to David Bowie. And when you're listening to that quality of music, some of it is bound to rub off.
I'm cheekily trying to find out the singer from Vinegar Joe while I'm talking to you, Di.
Yeah, you'll know him. He did quite well for himself.
Robert Palmer.
Yeah, that's him.
I wouldn't have got there, but it makes sense now. Of course, yeah, two great voices out there. Elkie Brooks and Robert Palmer.
Robert Palmer, great band, yeah.
So the Rockfield thing, that story is about to be told anyway. But I always find it fascinating how these two guys who probably quite without even much of a plan, I suppose, had an interest in music. They were farmers, weren't they, to begin with? I think the brothers.
Yes,
just converted into a studio, and the way they went.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about Charles. I don't know Charles that well, but certainly Kingsley.
Kingsley's a big sound guy,
yeah. Yeah. He was a keyboard player in a band, and that's where I think he met Dave Edmonds, who, and who's synonymous with Rockfield, really.
Yeah. Of course, Rockpile and Andy Fairweather-Low, and there's a whole kind of family, I suppose, isn't there, of kind of renowned Welsh musicians over the years. Andy Fairweather-Low, I guess you've worked with him over the years.
But Andy came to the old Music Factory studio on a number of occasions, bits and pieces. But I know Andy, but I can't say I've ever worked with him. Andy is, fantastic. What a singer! What a fabulous guitarist! He must be good, because look at the names that he's worked with. Just stupendous. And I just love the fact that he's a Cardiff lad. I love the fact that anybody from Wales that goes on and does something is great. In my book, really. More string to our elbow.
Yes, because it hasn't always been easy, has it, Di, for Welsh artists or musicians to be taken seriously, I don't think, in music over the years.
Well, 150 miles away from London, but 100 years behind, it's not so much these days. I think the greatest thing that's ever happened really is the internet, obviously. I mean, I work, it doesn't matter whether I'm working with a company from Timbuktu or from Ystrad Mynach, they're all the same to me. It's fantastic that I'm able to do that. And I think that has helped, no doubt about it. Now the world has become, it's just one community really, isn't it? And as long as you can show your talent, I think you will be accepted. Chris Buck, guitarist from, I think he's from Newbridge Way, isn't he? Newport Way, that way, Cwmbran. Just been voted outstanding guitarist, best up and coming guitarist by the Guitarist magazine, in the world. How great is that? Yeah, so we've all got the talent. The only thing that we don't have in Wales, and this is the problem, is that we don't have the management. We don't have anybody to push us out of Wales, other than what we do for ourselves.
Yes.
And I think people like Chris, the guitarist, and James, the other guitarist, they're very good. They're very good at being able to promote themselves. And because of that, I think they're really onto a winner. They really are. It's a shame that we can't get. Well, our old manager, Carl, I mean, he's a boy from Kilvarcourt, who's made it. I believe he's a multimillionaire now. He manages so many acts you wouldn't believe it. Michael Bublé represents him. Very big bands, world-class bands, promotes them. He's done very well for himself. It's a shame that people like that couldn't move back to Wales and do something for the local talent, really.
Well, I mean, the thing is, what you're referring to there a little bit. I mean, it certainly applies to journalism, and it certainly applies to the media in Wales. By having a kind of indigenous media sector in Wales, it's never really kind of had that, has it? And when you have, there's no local radio in Wales. There's a BBC covering the whole of the nation. Or the big stations are eating each other up. It's a tough time for the media, I think, in Wales, actually.
Oh, very much so. I mean, I saw it. I did work for 10 years within ITV Wales. Obviously, it used to be HTV.
Yeah.
And of course, the orders would come down from London, and everybody had to adhere to those orders, really.
Yes, and that's the way it still. That's the way it still is.
Yeah.
If I can take you on to sound more into the realm of sound. Just because I want to talk to you a few things about this. I say don't feel obliged to give elongated answers if you're short of time, but I'm really interested in capturing this from you. First question, very simple question. In the university where I work, all the students, all they want to see is pictures, okay? They just want to see visuals, they just want to see pictures, they just want to see images. Why does sound matter?
Well, sound I believe, is a good 60% of the actual visuals. You hear what you see. Try taking away a soundtrack from a cartoon. What you left with? All right, yeah. I mean, you can understand, you can see it, but it doesn't bring it to life. And what I try to do in my work is try to bring the visuals to life, to complement the visuals. Without that, you've only got 40% of a film or 40% of a television program. Imagine having a documentary with no sound. How boring would that be?
For me, if you compared visuals, sort of, should we say, film and TV to radio, I think radio audio gives us the best pictures.
Oh, very much so. It's all in the head, isn't it? You make up your own visuals to the sound. I was involved with a project where they actually put visuals to my sound. It started off as a green field with the odd sheep in the background and somebody walking. And they walked and they got closer to a cow, and the cow went off then into the distance. And then eventually I could hear a train in the background. And as I walked closer, it became obvious that this train was going through the tunnel. I was actually the other end of the tunnel. When the train came out, of course, it's thundering around you, and it's moving, from left to right and into the surrounds, and it's gone from being, 40 dBs to 120 dBs, and we actually tried to portray that, but they couldn't do it. The sound was too intense.
I would say that's a shame you said that, because I was hoping that it did exist. I'd have loved to have seen the final result of that.
Yeah.
Interesting though.
I think it was just too expensive to film,
yeah.
a steam train.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But it is, to my ears, it's 60% of the overall picture.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that, because I totally agree with you.
I've been involved with a project for the BBC, and it's for the children's channel, actually. And in that, it features a lot of children, boys of the age of about 13, 14, and girls playing football. And we've replaced every single footstep on that pitch. Every ball kick has been replaced. So we really go into that detail. On the pitch, the main character turns into a timid sort of schoolboy into Superman. So everything changes. The visuals change. He becomes like electric. It becomes zap, pow. It's Superman. And then we go back to everyday life.
Fair enough. I was just trying to think about the difference between pre versus post in terms of, if you're using certain mics, kind of trying to get sort of stereo miking and, surround and all the rest of it. Is that all mostly done for you in the post stage, or do they have to record it in a certain way and then you take it up a stage? I don't know.
As far as I'm concerned, and I think 99% of everything is done with a mono microphone. Although the mono microphone might be recorded on 2 tracks, or it could be on 1 track and a radio mic on another track. Generally, all dialogue is mono. And if you go to the cinema, you'll find that most of virtually 100% of dialogue will always come through the center speaker. So there's no point in recording multi-track or recording the dialogue in stereo. It ain't going to be used. I will always use it in mono. I will treat it in mono, EQ it in mono, reverb it in mono to create a stereo effect, but it'll come from a mono source. Now, most sound recordists nowadays will have digital recorders capable of recording up to 12 individual tracks. So you'll find that you've got 1 or 2 boom mics on tracks 1 and 2. You'll have radio mics from the individual characters on tracks 3, 4, anything up to 12 radio mics, say. And then it'll be my job then to make them all sound the same. Very difficult, because a boom mic will be good quality, a radio mic not quite so good quality, a cheap radio mic even worse quality. But you have to do your job and make them sound equal.
And I think is it called Isotope FX? I think it's the noise reduction software. That's about 400 quid or something like that, I think.
Well, the full package that I've got here is, can run into about £1,500.
Yeah. So I mean, some of that I don't know. I just wonder, because some of this stuff is quite expensive. So if we're talking in this case, should we say for students, they haven't got 2 beans to rub together, sort of thing. Have you got any sort of advice for people who want to capture quite good sound or create quite good sound on a budget in terms of maybe software and hardware? Would you have any ideas on that at all, or thoughts?
Yes. Go to avid.com and download Pro Tools free. It's 90% of the big boys Pro Tools. Free plugins to get started, from equalizers to compressors to reverbs, delays, phasers, flanges, plus the fact that you can record up to 16 tracks of digital audio, either from your computer or importing, say, MPEGs or WAV files. The only thing that you can't do it to picture with the free version. But considering it's for free, it's a phenomenal piece of software, really. In musical terms, there's another one called Studio One, which we've just had a big update, and I believe that is free as well. But certainly, if it's only tens of pounds, I think, as opposed to thousands of pounds, and well worth investing in. But if you want to start off, Pro Tools free is just phenomenal. Not only that, it gives you amount of cloud storage, so you can collaborate with other facilities or other musicians anywhere in the world.
That sounds great, actually. I didn't know that. And would you have advice for newcomers who want to get into sound and are thinking, I love all this stuff, I want to get into the film industry and maybe I can get in through sound? Any kind of general advice, kind of golden rules or whatever?
And there are some basic things, but it's not complex. It's very easy stuff. I mean, for instance, if you're recording a voice, you'll get that microphone in as close as you can. But if you choose the right microphone, you can't really go wrong. It's in investing, I think, in cheap equipment is false economy, really. If you're that determined to do something, then invest in something which is of a quality. At the end of the day, you can always sell it and probably make most of your money back. With cheap equipment, it'll sound bad, and you'll just have to throw it away after you've become bored of it.
What kind of opportunities do you think there might be for young people wanting to get into the industry? Are there sort of certain tasks which might be a good way in?
Well, I can give you an instance of what to do. I went into town a couple of years ago, and I had a pizza with my partner, Ellie, who's an effects editor. And we sat there eating the pizza. And this young lad came up to me. I said, "Thank you very much, blah, 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 blah." He said, "Oh, I'm only here." He said, "I'm a student, really." He said, "I'm a student." I said, "What you do?" "Oh," he said, media studies, blah, 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 and sound design." I said, "Oh, I do that." "Where'd you do it?" I said, "Oh, at the time I was based up in ITV." "Oh, I'd love to do that," he said. "Can I come up?" So the next day he came up.
Good on him.
And the day after he came up. And the day after that he came up. And the day after that he came up. And then he offered his services completely for free. So we gave him a couple of jobs to see what he was capable of doing. And then we employed him. So the answer is, if you're that enamored with what we do, be persistent. Don't take no for an answer. If I say no today, I might not say no tomorrow. I might be busy today or I might be grumpy. Keep on to me. I'll say yes eventually because I just want to get rid of you.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. I've got a student in mind. I won't name him now. I won't embarrass him now. I think he's from Poland,
Right.
but he's got a fantastic attitude. I mean, he actually went to the BBC when I know it's moving from Llandaff now. He went there, knocked on the door, and asked for the guy who ran sort of BBC Radio Wales. And the guy, the commissioning editor was so amazed. He actually came down to talk to him and had a cup of tea, and and he started the ball rolling because he had the goal to actually go knock on the door and say, "Can I talk to the guy who runs this place? Because I want, this is what I want to do." That's just a great attitude, isn't it?
Oh, that's the way to do it. You just got to pester people. I mean, at the end of the day, obviously it's down to talent, but I think if you believe in yourself enough, you'll probably have that talent. Because you want to do it. You're not taking no for an answer. As I say, you're talking your lad that you're talking about. Then send him up here.
I'd love to do that. I know you'd like him, and he's I wouldn't send him to you if I didn't think he would work his ass off and take in every single thing you said to him.
Yeah, no, by all means, honestly, I would welcome that because. Over the years, I've worked with a lot of students from the atrium as well. I mean, when I was in ITV, they used to come up, you see. And then I talk to them and say, well, out of college or whatever, you're more than welcome to come up. Some did, some didn't. The ones who didn't obviously weren't that interested, or they didn't like me.
Well, they didn't believe in themselves, or they were too lazy. One of those, I suppose.
Yeah, and there's a few of them out there.
Yeah.
I've seen. They're only there for the ride.
Yes.
It seems to be an easy way out of it, really. But those who really are interested, there was one lad actually from Swansea. I did some stuff with him down there, and he was an American lad who was over studying there. He was warm. He really was. He knew more than I did, far more than I did. Because he was modern, his finger on the pulse. And I just think it's great. I mean, nowadays. You'd be hard pushed really to baffle me, certainly on the software side of things, because I have to keep my finger on the pulse. Working with other facilities as well. I mean, I've been working with a London facility where my work is actually analysed in London by the big boys. So I have to be compatible with them. So if they say they've got a blah, blah, blah to do a blah, 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 then I've got to have that blah, blah, blah to do the blah, blah, blah. So they're helping me keep my finger on the pulse, really.
And sometimes I suppose you got to hire kit in for that. You just got to get the job done, haven't you?
Yes, or buy it. Yeah. So there's a lot of money goes out for software.
Yeah.
The hardware I'm using here is a few years old, but thankfully I bought wisely, and it stood me in good stead. But there's always a new computer that will do something that's slightly faster.
Yes.
The beauty of Pro Tools is it either works or it doesn't, So mine has been working very well for me, actually.
Yeah,
I did make the leap from Mac to PC some years ago.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
I went the other way.
From PC to Mac.
Yeah.
You're obviously earning too much money then.
Well, I don't know about that. But I thought that, but I mean, it's actually on that topic. Another way of looking at that, I suppose, I guarantee, I think that you'd agree that you know, we can talk about gadgetry and we can talk about software, we can talk about tricks and everything else, but, you know, software becomes obsolete relatively quickly. It's always about content, isn't it? It's always about, you know, creating content that works, isn't it?
Oh, most definitely, yes. I mean, without, I mean, the biggest compliment you can pay me really is that it sounds as if it's happening. It sounds normal. If it sounds normal, then that's fantastic. I've done my job.
Job done,
And
yeah.
that's all I'm trying to do really is to create with the drama normality. But then we have to go from normality to fairy tale. And as long as there's nothing out of balance within the mix, I mean, the footsteps are not too loud. You can hear the dialogue. The sound effects are effectual when needed. You know, if it's a gunshot shot, it's there to for effect. The squelch of the blood, you know, the splash of the blood on the floor. All these things, they probably fairy tale. It probably wouldn't happen like that. In fact, I know it doesn't happen like that. But
Yeah,
for the people who are looking and listening, it all adds to the sense of the feeling for the film or the drama at least.
I mean, and the example of that, which we talked about recently, was we said about 2001. We talked about different interpretations of space because, you know, until we actually go there and sit in space, how the hell are we going to know? So it gives you that creative space, doesn't it, to use that pun, really?
Oh yes, I mean, you know, in my group days, I went to space quite a few times.
But that's another story. I've only got two more things to say to you, and the one is we can't, I guess, not mention your BAFTA and A Mind to Kill. Yeah. Do you want to talk? Is there a scene from that I Wonder Die where is there something I should track down which would epitomize why you won that award? You know, in terms of sound for that particular production.
Gosh. Well, to me, just the days sort of meld into weeks, turn into months. It's hardly like making tins of beans, but you know what I mean. It's not nothing really stands out. There's quite a few of us actually working on that. I was the mixer. I would be in charge of, say, the dialogues. I mean, I can tell you what was bad just about every one of the programs I've worked on, but I can't really tell you what was the good. I did get another BAFTA actually for something recently. I say recently, crikey, is 6 years ago now, but that was with Michael Sheen, and that was a remake of the Easter story, basically, where we all know what happens. The main character gets crucified at the end of it, but it was meant as a theatre production down in Port Talbot and Aberavon, and the sound for that was basically a PA for the audience, but there were cameramen and there were sound recordists in the audience. But of course, one cameraman was not particularly locked to any of the 13 sound recordists. So the director of this theatrical production decided he wanted to make a feature film of it. But we had to go back to the original audio or find the original audio from no time code values, meaning that there was no sound linked to any of the pictures. So myself and my partner spent 7 weeks analyzing the sound from 13 different sources and trying to place it with a particular visual, which was hard work. We did it.
Is that like 360 stuff you're talking about?
We produced a film, which, you know, didn't sound great, but there was no sound to start off with. And we actually got recognised for that, and we were awarded a BAFTA, a Welsh BAFTA for that. And that was a film called The Gospel of Us. But what I do remember from that is that we had Michael Sheen here, and we were revoicing him. Problem was that he had to be back in Hollywood to do whatever it was, you know, within a couple of days. So we only had him for a day. And one of the scenes right at the end, he's being crucified as Jesus Christ. And the sound, we couldn't use it from, obviously, there was no sound. So we recorded it as in the studio here. So we put the picture up for him and he starts screaming. And it didn't sound right. So it didn't sound right because Jesus would have been crucified on a cross in the open air. So I put him outside on a Sunday afternoon set up a monitor, a headphone, and a microphone outside. Played the pictures, and he started screaming. As these nails were going into his hand, the screams got louder. And then we noticed all the neighbours were hanging out of their windows, going, "That's Michael Sheen, isn't it? What's he screaming for?"
Yeah, not every day you see that, is it?
It's not every day you see that, no. But, you know, where needs must, whatever needs doing, we'll do it. But, you know, as I say, I'm still in love with sound, and I'll try and get as close to whatever, you know, whatever's needed, really. A big thing these days, I've got to mention this, really, is that time. Is that a lot of the productions just don't have the time anymore to set up the scene, to rehearse the scene, for the sound recordist to get in there and get really good sound. So the sound that hits us sometimes is not brilliant. But thankfully nowadays, with people like Isotope on the case, we're able to reduce the noise that's generated on set. The car pass, the bird song, that sort of thing. We're able to extract that. The reverb even on a voice, it might be recorded in a warehouse, whereas, you know, we want a close-up sound, but they haven't been able to get the microphone in close enough. We're able to actually eliminate reverbs and things nowadays, which is absolutely brilliant. I just wish we'd had all that technology years ago. I'd be a rich man now.
The final thing to ask you, Di, is because funny enough, it's taking me a while because you're so busy, to find a time where we can do this. And even today, you've had fresh work coming through.
Yes.
What is next for you, or what are you working on right now?
Lockdown hasn't affected me one iota up until now. But of course, production companies are not filming. They're not shooting anymore. So although I've continued to work, between now and Christmas, I'm going on holiday. So the answer is, I don't really know. Fingers crossed.
Okay. Well, Di, thank you very much. Absolutely fascinating to talk to you.
Oh, my pleasure.
And thanks for your time. And it's greatly appreciated. And I will send that student your way.
Yeah, most definitely. And if you want any noise reduction doing, I know a man who does it.
Thank you, Di.